Hello, everyone. Welcome to my Tuesday night live painting demo. See, there's a few of you already here. Um, Glad that you can join me. Started by doing my drawing um, over on Instagram. Oh, it says now I'm live. Okay, there might be a little bit of a delay, but that's okay because um, I there is no delay here in person, so that's fine. When I talk, I hear myself talking. So I know I'm just talking craziness. So I did start on this drawing, so I should be able to go straight into the painting here. I hadn't really selected out my brushes for tonight, but I have a nice big one. You know what? I'm going to switch over to this flat brush. This is one I had been using on my last painting. This is is a number 8 flat, has a nice edge to it still, so it allows me to work pretty broadly, but getting in with a corner um, to put in a little bit of detail, not super exact detail. And this is a muse from the app Sketchy. Unfortunately, I lost her, can't figure out which account this photo came from. I do know her name is Maddy, I think, because the same photo was used on a YouTube channel with that name, but I don't have any contact information from that. So I'm just going to come in and try to lay down some very wet paint. Some of the basic tones here. Let's see if I can thicken up the paint a little bit. It's just a little bit too runny. I will um, start by getting some of the general colors down that I need. That's a little bit too dark, but I can then easily just come in with a little more white. Um, just by blocking in some of these major colors, hopefully that will give me a quick start on this one. There's a lot of detail in her blouse, and I'm not sure I'm going to really deal with much of that tonight. I may save that for doing offline. There's some, um, show you just real quickly, there's lots of embroidery here and transparency of her blouse. There's even some creases in the fabric where there's some darker lines. Those I just may end up omitting because they don't really add anything to the painting. Then we have her hair that's coming across all of it. Her hair is bleached in some spots, and then again with the transparency, the embroidery, and the sleeves against the tones in her face. So that's a little bit of a mental workout to get all those values right to get that to work. I see Melania's casting maybe from the Adirondack Mountains, um, and on vacation. And Lady is here, Carolyn rather. Great. And then there's a few other people here. I see that besides me, there's 10 other people. It's counting me. I just have my channel open so that I can read your comments, and so it's counting me as, in a way, as a person that's watching. I'm watching myself. Okay, so um, again, just blocking in these forms, and when I'm blocking this in, I'm trying to just picture the dimension of these things by painting around forms, trying to um, maintain an illusion of space so that as I work, it's just not flat areas of color, but really something that has dimension. And also using a little trick that I figured out from last week when I had all this graphite is that I can kind of get in there with a little bit of a wet brush and smear that graphite around, and it makes kind of a interesting, gives me a quick dark value that I can play around with, move around to sort of get my edges a little bit. Come in with a little bit of white to, and then her forehead is going to be very light up here, so I'm just going to start coming in with pure white just to start to build up that value structure a little bit. Okay, so then I didn't really have drawn in the crease in her eye, which, so I'm going to just try to do that with the edge of my brush, just a little bit of purple and black. And just so you know, I'm using dioxazine purple, which is a wildly concentrated color. Just a little bit goes a long way. And ivory black. I've been listening to a podcast on the Savvy Painter podcast. I'll probably put the link in that in my description later, but I've been listening to that for the last few weeks while I go on my morning walks. And there's a couple of podcasts where she has Robert Gamblin from Gamblin Paints and also the president, I think his name was, I want to say Kevin, but forgive me if I'm wrong. Anyway, they talk a lot about the colors and the quality of their colors, and um, I had been staying away from chromatic black because I just assumed it wouldn't give me as rich a black as the ivory. Um, but it's interesting because they talk about it being so transparent that that will allow you to build to a very transparent, a very rich black if you apply it cleanly and in enough layers, then it does get that nice richness to it. So I want to play around with a little of that. And that chromatic black is a mixture of phthalo, I think it's phthalo green and quinacridone red. So there is no, as they put it in the podcast, there were no blacks harmed in the there was no black pigment harmed in the making of that black. And for those painters that for religious reasons don't paint with black, that is a great alternative to get black onto your palette with, which is essentially mixtures of other colors that are would be on your palette or could be on your palette naturally. So so I'm painting with oil paint. The good question, Carolyn. And I only paint in oils. I've painted in acrylics a lot in art school, and let's just say I don't have a great relationship with acrylics. Um, Besides a few things, one is that they don't dry back the same color as you paint, so it's again an additional mental exercise to get um, every brush stroke in acrylics to dry the right color. But then also blending, getting sort of that soft edge and blending techniques with acrylics is really hard. You have to either work in sort of a glazing layers and scumbling to get sort of those softer edges, or you have to work extremely quickly, sometimes add some sort of medium that would slow down the drawing time. But naturally acrylics do dry up pretty quickly, and so it's really hard to get those wet into wet effects. And oils, it's just you have all day and all night essentially, literally, to do it. So I'm painting in the whites of the eyes, and if you look, I'm painting him kind of uh, like a step, three steps darker on the on a value chart than white because um, I because they're not really white in a sense, and they have a little bit of blue in them. If you compare the reflection in her eye to the white of her eye, you can see that the white of her eye is quite a bit darker, and you want enough room in the reflections to be able to also be a little bit darker. So if you need to um, have them be a color, you can add a little bit of a color, tinted color, a slightly darker than white, so that that color will be apparent. I put the black in the wrong spot here, so I'm going to come in quickly with some darker blue to get, or a little bit lighter blue to get that color back. Okay, and then her iris is going to be right there. Sorry, her pupil. Something like that. Okay, so I just really want to just indicate where things are. I'm not going to go crazy with detail at this stage. Just kind of get a feel of it, get the position of where the eye starts and ends, where the position of the lid is in space. And if I do throw in a little bit of detail, I know a lot of people say don't do this quite yet, but I like to just put in a little dots where the highlights are, so I can get a sense of the direction of the eye and the surface quality of it, and that really does help me. So if it starts to look like sort of something realistic right off the bat with just a little bit of detail, that's very helpful. Helps me kind of see a little bit better where I am. Okay, and I'm trying to move very quickly. It's there's a lot to do on this, and then I have where the crease their eye is. I think I just need a little bit of a smaller brush. Excuse me while I got in front of the camera there. Yeah. Okay, you guys got to see a close up on my complexion there. It's okay. I don't have a vein bone in my body. Well, maybe one or two, but overall. Okay, so that's just getting just a little bit sharper and thinner line for that crease in her eye, because where the eyelid comes up and where the forms above her eyelid, they really are in tension. They're pushing against each other and creating this fairly narrow crease. And then I'm just going to try to do all her eyelashes right now in just sort of one black stroke there, just to get an idea of where it is. And see if I can improve the shape of that pupil a little bit, just so I can really start to see it. And then put in the darker outer edge of the iris there. Okay, that's great. And so since the light is coming straight at the subject, you can tell by the reflections in her eyes, then I also have to look at how that is lighting the forms that are in her face. So her eyelid, for example, will have the lightest light of that eyelid right in the center, and there actually is some light that's also reflecting back at us from the texture in her skin. That form really isn't pointing at us, but with all the texture, it is picking up bits of kind of reflectiveness right towards us. So we get a little bit of that in. And then her hair, I have to be very careful here because the tendency is to push the hair away from her eye. It's really coming down right here. A little bit, get a little more orange in here as she has this changing coloration of her hair. Orange and red. So the one downside to ivory black is that it has a little bit of coolness to it, and so it shifts the color. When you mix it with warm colors, it shifts them greener. So if I add a little bit of orange with black, it gets kind of ochery, and if I mix a little bit of red with the black, then it shifts a little bit more orange, more like a burnt sienna. And it's actually why I don't have a burnt sienna on my palette, because I can get it so easily by mixing the reds with black. I've tried to pare down my palette over time by eliminating colors that I can replicate by mixing colors together. I know that there's some artists that like to have tons of color on their palette so that that it just saves them mixing time. They can just go right for a particular color when they need it. Um, I'm kind of the opposite. I kind of feel like I can mix very quickly, but maintaining all those colors of paint on my palette, making sure that they stay wet for a while, and um, finding the tube when I need to replace it. If I can just do it with less colors, it's for me in my mind, it just simplifies everything. Um, okay, something is happening with my mic. Um, I don't know. Should Okay. Tell me if you're still having problems with the audio, and I am going to keep on going. Sometimes the if the front of the mic is right in front of my mouth, you'll hear a lot of popping sound. But if the connection is bad, then the sound may drop out. So if you can let me know which is happening, I can be a little bit more aware of it. Okay, just indicating where the hair is here. Want to get the darker values that are around the face in, because that will help me judge the values that are in the face. Okay, let me see. Is the mic working? Okay, I'm going to keep on going, assuming that everything's okay until I hear back from somebody. And okay, just going to keep on putting in some darks around her face. This line here is coming right about the edge of her eye here. Really can be quite messy with the paint right up here, because I am going to refine it later. Okay, don't hear back from anyone. Working just choppy sometimes. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I got this new adapter for my phone, so I can both charge it and plug a mic into it at the same time, which I hadn't been able to do. So before I was depending on the mic on my phone, which sounded terrible, and generally I wasn't near the phone when I was talking, so the volume would be so low on the recording that it would be really hard to hear me at all. So hopefully this is an improvement, and that I don't have to go back to the drawing board on this one, but we'll see. She's getting quite a bit of light on her ear here. Hopefully that's about the right value. I can judge if I surround that with the dark. And then I get a pretty rich purple shadow along the side of her face here. Just going to go right with a pretty strong purple and adjust that edge. Okay. Doesn't look like much yet. I'm going to just throw in kind of about where I think her nostrils are. And I have that purple here, which I can put around the base of her nose. And then a little bit of darker orange along the sides of her nose here. And I need to get a lot more white on the front. And then I want to keep, she's underlit just slightly here, so the top of her nose is darker. And then I'm going to just go right for that thick paint there that's going to, in the end, try to make it look like it's the highlight on her nose. If I'm real careful about the transition of values here, you're really going to start to see the shape of her nose and where it turns under. And then I I'm just going to get that dark that's there. So, and then that's surrounded by a lot of pretty light color. So I have to get even lighter there. Come in with more and more white until I get it to the value that I want. So there's a little bit of paint, and then there's a graphite that's down there already. So either I can try to wipe that stuff off, or I can just know that eventually I'm going to use enough white to get that enough coverage there to cover over it. And then I'll just be adding a little bit of the pigment of coloration as I go. So for example, the outer parts of her cheek has a little bit of orange. Maybe that's mostly makeup. Here, it just looks like she has a bit of makeup on. So I'm just going to kind of get that, a little bit of that pigment in now. And then her jaw here goes pretty red. And just an indication, a little bit of dark red here on the outer edge of her nose. Okay, and then I know I'm going to have to soften this up a little bit. These darks here are much more subtle. And a little bit of an orangey color darker here on the far edge. Almost goes to black. Okay. Then white, where the philtrum is, sort of two white ledges. When I say white, I just mean lighter, because they're not really going to white there. Just in relationship to everything else, they're lighter. And then I'm going to go in with some pretty strong quinacridone red and alizarin crimson. Oh, that's just more quinacridone red, I think. I think I've used up my alizarin crimson. So at some point I may have to dig down and get more out. Okay, but that's pretty close to the color that I want for upper lip. To pay attention to where the center line is here. It's coming down a little bit this way and then down. Okay, that's looking good. I'm picking up a little bit too much black from the graphite that's down there, but if I lighten that up later, I can sort of keep the crease in the lips. A little bit more white there, right on the upper edge of her lower lip, and then go darker. And if I do this right, you should be able to start to see the fullness in her lips. Just slightly lighter there. Yep. Just get a little more white. And right here. Got a little too messy. Yep. Sometimes when I move a little bit too fast, then I'm like messing up what I already put down. So again, just like the eyelids, lighter in the middle and then gets darker as it goes towards the corners. And then I can draw out the corners a little bit with some alizarin crimson and purple, getting kind of a richly colored dark. Okay, that's good. And then I can clean up the edge of her lip a little bit as I go, which is her upper lip is a little bit greenish, very slightly. I don't know how I'm going to make that, but just getting a little bit more yellow and blues in the color. Yep, that's getting close to there. So I can clean this up a little bit. pretty good. Not perfect, but good enough for right now. So a little bit of pinkish, and then we're back to the greenish color. Just feeling that that side of the mouth is just a little bit too low. So I am going to come up and bring that up a little bit. And then likewise the center line I'm going to move up too. Which also may mean that I might have the tip of her nose just a little bit high. So I'm going to do a quick measurement. Never hurts to remeasure. It's in the right place. So why don't I measure then the center line of her lips then? Because that's what I'm perceiving as being off. It just looks a little bit too low. So I can bring that up a little bit by just moving that light up. That actually helps. And then continue that on the sides. So now I have to get that dark line, the separation up a little bit higher here. Okay, that's looking a little better. And so I think also what's throwing me off is I may have her nostrils just a little bit too high. So the base of the nose is right, but the darks of the nostrils are just, I had them up too high, so it makes the whole nose feel like it was just a little bit too high. And I'm just going to indicate, not get crazy with it, where the nose ring is. That'll help me out later. Something like that. Then it's going to have a kind of a yellowish, no, it's actually kind of pink, that color of the reflection on there. Okay, just to get an idea. And there's a little bit of a shadow of the edge of her nostril. And the reflection. I'm gonna have to clean that up a little bit later, but that just helps sort of position things. Okay. So soften up the edge of that cheek there and there's going to be some purple reflections here. I think there's a little purple in her eyeshadow that's giving that color. I don't know if it's the light or her eyeshadow. And then pulling down the lights, there's just a little bit of orange in there too. So I'm just trying to mimic the value structure that I see in the photo, but I'm also trying to remember that this part of the cheek is facing down. There's a part of the cheek that is facing up, that's right here. And there's this little fancy, I don't even know what to call it, but I kind of identified as this triangle in between forms that sit right here. That's usually a little bit darker. And then we can see that very subtly on both sides of her face. And I just like to get those in, and so it sort of gives me where the upper edge of the cheek is as it swoops down from the corner of the eye and the side of the nose. Let's see if I get this transition here a little bit softer. And then start that dark along the side of her nose just a bit lower than when I had it. I want to compare that to the other side of the nose to make sure that I'm bracketing that shape correctly. And then I can soften up the lights on this side of the nose. And just needs to go a little bit darker right up there. Okay. Okay, Dan, thank you for joining. And I don't tend to paint with a medium. To answer Doug's question, I just have some Gamsol, which is odorless mineral spirit, and I tend to clean my brush as I work, and it also use it to wet my brush. If I don't really want the brush to be that wet as I'm working, then I'll wipe off really well with a paper towel after each cleaning of the brush. So I can control by how much I dry the brush. I can control how thin the paints are as I work. Just get a little bit of that light that's here in on the top of the bridge of the nose. And then there's a little bit of a turn down, which is goes a little bit darker, and there's quite a bit of pink in that area. But I have a too great a value difference. It's just very subtle, that change up here. It's a little bit better. And then top of the brow, it starts to get light again up here. So need quite a bit of white to get that light enough. So I'm starting to squint down to see like where my values are the most off. There's quite a bit of light on the top of the cheek here, and a little bit more on the other side too. And then this form of the underneath the brow ridge here is catching a little bit of light, and then her eyebrows are purple. I said it, they're purple. Try to get those sort of indicated where they are. Just don't have to be perfect right away. It's not going to be all one brush stroke like Sargent. I'm going to work up to it. Okay, just trying to get those forms turning at the right speed. Okay. It's a little bit hard to get the sense of realism unless you really pay attention to those changes of value and get them somewhat accurate. There's a little bit of shadow under the lid of her eye. Her lid stops about here, and then there's, I don't want to call them bags, but it's just a little bit of tissue there that goes around, and she has that on the other side. Let me clean up that dark a little bit to get that. And this would be a good time to paint the iris of her other eye so that I get a sense of the forms on that side of the face. So again, the color, the whites, I'm going to actually paint them a little more, a little warmer. Get the darker edge of that iris. Pupil quickly. I have a big square brush here. It's not easy to get paint a circular shape with it, but I'm just making a circular motion with the corner of that brush there. That looks kind of funny until I get the eyelashes painted in. Okay, something's a little bit off still, but that's just going to come with some subtle adjustment until it reads right. Okay. And then I'm going to throw in just the indication of the highlight in the pupil of that eye. Never get it right the first time, but it helps to kind of see it. And then I can start to work on the shapes of the lights and the darks around her eye there, where that follows the contour of the nose. Okay. So her face is slowly starting to appear out of all this. It's got some of that orange blocked in, orangey red that's on her lower parts of her cheek. It has a little bit more towards purple here. Let's carve a little bit in tighter the edge of her nostril. And then she has a little bit of an orange, darker orange there on the lower edge. So you can get that darker orange just by putting just a spot of black and mixed in with the color. And then it goes into black up here. Okay, that's not too far off. Okay, so once I get the rest of this color of her jaw and then a little bit of her neck, then I can really start to judge how good those colors and values are. Just shade this in a little bit with the paint and graphite that I got down. Okay, so that's the one indicate where her jaw is running out in shadow. Goes quite quickly, sort of ash purple, and greens, a little bit of blues in there on this side. And then right after, then it really does go pretty close to black. So I'll get that in a second. I just want to push the top of this, her chin, a little bit lighter. So that's thicker white paint there. There's a little indication of red along where that purple, before that purple starts. Okay, get that in some of those lighter values. And that dark is a little bit subtler there. Okay. Starting to get some of those subtle transitions in. And I'm missing the shadow that's underneath, a fairly reddish shadow that's underneath her lips right there. There's a little bit of a white, when I say white, a light separation between the two. It's just catching a little bit of reflected light. And let's cut a little bit of red in the upper edge of her lips there. Let's see. Fix this shape here. Okay, good. So overall, not too bad. I may have something looks a little bit high in the where her eyes are. Maybe I just need to find where the that crease is in her eyelid there. I think that's about right. And just like the eyelid on the other side, or the eyebrow, there's that nice light area here where it's has a little bit of highlight on it, and then it goes to darker on the sides. You can just sort of rub the paint in a little bit. Go a little bit softer with the paint. And get a little bit of that transitional color as it moves away from that crease, so you feel the turn of the form there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And same here. And I just want a little bit of indication of red where the tear duct is, not too strong, just so I see it. I see where the anatomy changes there. Oh, that was a little bit messed up. Okay, let's go soften that white. And the bottom, let's do a little measuring. Not feeling confident. Yep, that's the right place. There's pupil or something's a little bit off, but that's okay. Yeah, so I need my smaller brush to get, so I need something like a round brush to get that round shape. Kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you were working in Photoshop and you wanted to paint something circular, you would get a brush shape that was the shape of what you were painting. Okay, I want to get a little bit of stronger color in her iris, so I'm trying to mix this blue-green a little bit more cleanly so I can get a little bit richer. Yeah, and I've really mistreated my brushes here by standing them up in the paint thinner overnight in the solvent. That's really terrible for a brush, but I also only spend about $1 per brush, so some point when I grow up, I'm going to invest a little bit more in more expensive brushes, and I'm going to treat them right. And but until then, I am going to be irresponsible. Okay, this eyelid isn't doing what I said, which is it's not lighter in the middle. It's a little bit lighter on the side. Don't know why. Not stopped to analyze it yet. And I totally messed up the white of that eye. So let's see if I can get that back. And get the underside of the eyelid in the right place. And that eye is not going to look right until I have that darkening the inside of the eye. Okay. What I mean by the inside of the eye is that lid is over the inside of the eye and creating just a subtle shadow right here between the top, where the top of the white of the eye is, and the iris, and the rest of the eye. So this is a step darker, so you can feel the dimension of the eyelid there, sitting out in front of the inside of the eye. Ooh, okay, it's a little bit warm tonight. I didn't put out my glass of ice water like I usually do. Don't know what I was thinking. So at some point I may take a 30-second water break, but I can keep on going right now. And so overall it's looking pretty good. I just feel like that upper lip is I still have it too low. And so since I measured that center line, I am just going to make that the upper edge of the lip just a bit higher. That's feeling a little bit better. And then I'm going to come in with a highlight right towards the top of that lower lip. Okay. And then drop that down a little bit. Oh. So what happens when I get a small brush in my hand, I start noodling around with these details that I should stay away from until I get further along in the painting. But, you know, maybe when I grow up. Okay. Um, oh, yeah, and I'm forgetting to do what I promised, which is coming in with a darker dark edge right along that shadow line of her chin. That's really going to help um, give that dimension as I get the values right in that shadow. And then that's going to go into a darker purple in her neck area, but not quite as runny. There we go. And I'm going to restate that black there because it just kind of got wiped out. Okay. So that's really going to help force our eye to see that her neck area is behind, further back than her chin. Her chin should look like it's coming out towards us. And now I need to switch to my big brush, that number 8 flat, so that I can block in the colors of her neck quickly. And with much more of the orange and white. Let's move this photo up so I can see what I'm doing. Got her neck muscles here. Forgot what they're called. And side of her neck. Get a little bit more white in here. And then a little bit more darker value right along that edge there. And that's going to help define that form. Darker orange. A little bit of black. Get a little bit of the black in there. And then just trying to get the feel of the anatomy of the neck there. Then we got a lot of reflected light coming up off that edge. Okay, so let's get just a hint of black around the sides of her neck so we can define that. And then her shirt coming across and then sweeping back. And then the underside of her hand there. Okay. I'm going to do a quick indication of where her hand is. Great. That's dropping off on that side. And then quickly just a little bit of the black from her sleeve. Just trying to get the indication of the seam on the sleeve just to give it a little bit more interest. And I just really want to think in my head that this is a cylinder shape. It's moving away from us. So I want to have that oval shape to it. Trying to trim it a little bit on that side. And then the same here as it pulls around the arm to get that oval shape. And then that transparency is kind of a purpley color. And paint it thinly if I want. Give it the same kind of feel, or that I can come back in and refine it a little bit with thicker paint. If you look at there's a painting of Madame Gautreau by John Singer Sargent, not the famous one, the Madam X, but a study that he did of her beforehand. It's just a quick oil painting, really beautiful, where she's holding out I want to say it's a wine glass. Um, Her face is in profile, and she's wearing this very sheer um, sleeved dress, and he just has it painted just in the like briefest of brushstrokes. You can totally get the sense of the transparency of the whole thing. It's drives me crazy when I see that, but it's okay. It's John Singer Sargent. You can't get too mad at him for being who he is. But if you have a chance, pull it up online and take a look at that painting, and it is really magnificent. He was only like 29 years old when he painted that. Really already had full control of all of his faculties and um, his um, his talents to be able to do whatever he pointed at, essentially. Okay. So we need to get the turn of this jaw moving a little bit faster away from us. Right here. It's going to look wrong until I do that. And then the hand is poking out from back there. Get that shadow from the palm of her hand. And then that pulls into the neckline around there. Okay. So I'm missing an eyebrow. That's going to help a little bit. Let's make that one just a tad darker so we can see it. Okay, great. So I'm going to continue framing the face so that will give me enough to then really just dig in and really adjust all the forms in her face. Okay, leaving this area light. Eventually it will have some white in it to indicate the reflection that's off her hair. Okay, just indicating some of the landmarks. It's important that I get these kind of forms behind her head fairly accurate. They just seem like the accuracy of that isn't that important, but in the end, it tells our brain that she has enough cranium there that helps give additional information about the direction that her face is pointing. So it does help to pay attention to that and make sure that it's close to being right. See, when I get this big brush in my hand, I can start to move pretty quickly. That's the danger of having the small brush, is that you just start noodling in all those little detail areas and stop paying attention to the bigger forms. Just creating a little space where this earring is. I'm just going to come in with a little bit of thicker paint, and then I can then lay in some highlights on top of that to get the sense of the reflection. Okay, so seriously, now I have to really get the shape of her hand a little bit better. Her sleeve then cuts in right here conveniently, saving me a lot of time trying to paint the rest of her hand. So if I get the contour, the outer edges of these shapes right, um, that will help us really indicate, how do I say it? It'll help us get the feeling of those forms to feel a lot more accurate, because you're really seeing is reading the edge very quickly as helping us define the shape and the space, and have the direction of the earring off a little bit, so let's adjust that. Did not spend a lot of time on it, so I'm not crying that I have to repaint it yet. Okay, so we got the general gist of the whole face, and this is where I really want to start to refine the halftone and the shadows, so that it all starts to read. This all is very close in value, so I'm just going to rub it all back and then start coming in with more white on top, a lot of white. And then I'm missing a bit of orange right here along the hairline. And with that, some of the darks. Okay. So let me guys know if you're still with me there. You guys may be doing other things, that's fine. Um, I don't think I have quite as many people painting along this week, but that's all right too. There is a little bit of a dark edge here before the background goes blue. Let me just see if I can just spend a minute getting that background color. Oh, went too purple and I don't have enough blue on my palette. Okay. I think that's too colorful, but that's okay. Can always mix in a little bit of black. Okay, great, that's helping. And the other side, very close to the same value. Okay, going. Okay, great. Let's try to knock back this light a little bit. It's throwing me off. Okay, great. And the hair over here is getting pretty close to black, so I'm going to just keep on working in a little bit more black over here too. Okay. Now I can start to see pretty quickly where the drawing got away a little bit. Just start to refine these edges, get a little bit of blue-ish color here in the part of the hair. So this seems blue because the flesh doesn't get very tan there. Okay. And we have this leading edge of the hair going lighter. Okay. So let's start to adjust. So I can already see this edge of her face is going to be a little bit higher here. Have to pay attention to the contour. Remember I said that there's her jaw and then that little space in between and then her chin coming in. And so I can do a lot with that contour, not just paint it as a straight line, but really pay attention to what it's doing. Don't let a good contour go to waste, as I say. Do as much with it as you can. Okay, and I'm just missing that little bit of darker area that I said helps define the underside of her cheek, that hollow. Just have to make sure that I'm pulling it in from the edge there. Not quite going dark enough yet. Okay, that was good, but that upper edge is too hard. There we go. Okay, something like that. Pull the hair down a little bit further in. Then that dark can really, again, use the contour to help define what's going on there until you start to see that cheek pulling forward and the area underneath it dropping back. So just these little subtle changes of value that really, and the correctly drawn contour that really help the eye understand that. And so you just really have to pay attention. Okay, almost exaggerating it a bit too much, so I want to make sure that I get a little bit more of the makeup color and just soften that edge a little bit there. Great. Okay. So there's a lot happening there. I really want to start to focus on this eye to make sure that her eyeball is pointing in the right direction. That means pulling the eye over just a little bit. And I need my smaller brush. I need a better brush. Let's see, I think I have one here that's in pretty good shape. It's maybe bigger than I'd like. Yeah, but I still may get a point to it. I'm just about to the point where I need to buy. Sorry, spitting right into the mic. I'm about to the point where I need to buy some newer brushes because I've really beat up the ones that I have. This is not going to do it. I don't know if you can see the point of this. It's just too fuzzy. Let's pull it this way so you can see it. Anyway, so let me see what I got here in my brushes. Any detail brushes somewhere? Okay, there's got to be one in here somewhere. Okay. No. Even a good flat, a small one would do, because then I can use the edge to poke around. That one's worn down to nothing. And this should be a valuable lesson to you guys, always to keep a few brushes on hand that are in good shape. This might have to do it. One of these. I think actually the one that I was using, even though it's curling up. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so Carolyn says, I love the blue color in the background. Next time I'll paint along with you. Maybe I'll try an oil as well. If I know what basic colors you will be using, Thank you for sharing your process. So as far as the color goes, if you go to my Instagram page or even on the my channel description, there is a list of the colors that I'm using. On my Instagram page, there's one post where it just shows my whole palette and it lists out the colors. They're all Gamblin artist colors. And the colors that I choose are basically for their tinting strength because I like to get the maximum um, color range that I can. And so having that tinting strength really allows me to do that. And so if you're going to buy paints, I would go ahead and go to the Gamblin website and start to look at their color chart, their color experience section, which has a lot of um, color charts there. I don't know what I'm doing down here. I'm supposed to be painting the eye and getting it pointing in the right place. Okay, so I'm going to move back to where the eye is. I'm going to ignore where I've drawn the pupil because I'm just going to have to move that whole thing over just a little bit. It's not off by a lot, but I can't be swayed by what by the shapes that are already there. Okay, and then I have to draw a new pupil. And I need some pure blue. Don't really actually, this is going to come out pretty gray because I've gotten all these colors mixed together since I didn't have enough blue out. But here it's a little bit stronger. Not the right hue. I can always come back with a little more greenish color. Sorry about Sorry about that. Yep. Okay. And got to indicate where the top of that pupil is, right here. And then just a touch of white for the reflection that's just almost bullseye right in the middle of um, that pupil. Okay, don't have the best tip on this brush for doing this, but can always just put in some cleaning strokes around it. Okay, that's not looking too bad considering the tools that I'm using. And I want to make sure that I'm dark enough up here. Okay, that's not too bad. Add a little bit more white to her eye. Enlarging that shape a little bit. And that's starting to feel right. Okay, great. Who knows, I may look at that later and decide that it's in the wrong place, but for right now it feels about right. Okay, now's the time I gotta switch to a bigger brush. And start looking at the value changes, the structures of the forms up here. Okay, and then it stays white around their nose there. So I'm looking for that crease between the upper lip. It's very subtle, upper lip and the cheek. It's right around here. There's a little bit of a darker value that comes out from the corner of the nose right there. Just try to maintain that shadow that's there. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's correct her shape of her eyelid a little bit. Okay, I have about an hour or so left on this broadcast, so I'm trying to get as much done as I can in that time. Okay. Okay, yes, so Melania says, I like seeing your palette in the mixing process while you paint. Yes, so that was a flaw of my earlier videos. I didn't think that I could get close enough to the painting and also show my palette at the same time. So I was trying to figure out a way to like get a second camera in and all this stuff, and then I decided, hey, maybe if I just back up a little bit. That ended up doing the trick. Okay, I'm just gonna end up having very thick white paint up here until I get to the value that I want. Oop, I don't know what that was. Some dried paint. I think actually it was part of a peeled off label of the paint. So I have to work extra hard to get something pretty close to white up here. And it's just going to be getting some touches of very thick paint that just sit right on top of everything. And that will help reinforce that sense of the solidness of her forehead. Just that little textural interest too helps draw the eye to those areas and make them feel like they're closer than the areas that don't have texture. So that's one more sort of tool in a way to create a sense of form. Go just a tad lighter there. And back. Okay. Just working to get that right. Okay, so keep on going. And again, a little bit of purple in there underneath her eye. I think that's eye shadow. But it also may be an indication of some of their flesh tones there too. Let's dig into the white of the eye a little bit there. I know that's really too big a brush for doing this, but I saw how well I was able to work with that smaller curled up brush. So, and let's get a little bit of white on the corner of this brush to just get a little bit of a highlight there. Okay, great. That feels just a tad too high, but I can correct that a bit later. Okay, so this is where kind of make or break is really really getting these transitions accurately so that you start to feel the surface of her face. And that's just working back and forth with the values. Takes a little bit of time, but the payoff is really good. I also have to step back a little bit to see whether my drawing is still pretty accurate. Let's get a little bit of darkening that shadow there a little bit. And look how nicely that ear sits back if I'm getting those values right. Okay. Okay, Carolyn, thank you for tuning in tonight. Hopefully we'll get to see you soon painting along. Okay. So I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to try to do finish this up by 11. So I sense that we're making pretty good progress. And at some point, I kind of have to step back and look at things to really get to a finish. So that's if I not try to do a live podcast at the same time. Okay. A little bit of lights coming in here. A little bit of red shift. So I'm just really comparing colors, values as I go. This is where oil paint is quite flexible, is that you just keep on working into the paint that you already have down, and then you can make incremental changes quite easily. Just going to paint out where I had her nose ring in the shadow because it was not quite in the right place. Okay, that's looking a little better. Okay, great. Get a little bit of her eyebrow shapes in here. Kind of warm tonight. Hopefully you guys are feeling the heat wherever you are. Maybe we can get an air conditioner turned on over here. Okay. She's not looking too bad. Her face is feeling kind of long for me in relationship to the photo. And it's maybe that I'm not coming in sharp enough with her jaw. Just going to square her jaw a little bit to try to get that same feeling there. And then I'm going to come in a little bit tighter here. That's good. And then the same over here. Just a little bit and tighter. And pull that edge down just a little bit to have it turn faster. Ooh, okay. Okay, so sorry there's a little bit of problem with the audio. I may not be talking loud enough, or just the receptions, the Wi-Fi may be giving out a little bit. Really sorry about that. Okay, let's see if we can get a little bit of this transparent fabric here. We can get it in the right value. I may not have quite enough gesso down on this board because it's not quite picking up the black color the way I want, but I can come in just a little bit thicker. Maybe that will solve it. Okay, great. And see if I can get the right color again for the sheer fabric. A little more white. I'm running out of white, so I'm going to have to dig in soon to get more of that. There's just a bit of yellow and white together to get that kind of blonde streaking in her hair, but mostly white. Okay, and up. Okay, good. Just keep on blocking in some of those bigger shapes. That'll help me out in the end. Hello, Tori. Welcome from Virginia. Great. So not quite so late yet. You're on in the same time zone. I'm going to be working for about another half hour before I sign off. So I'm going to try to get as much done in this time as I can. Just again, really blocking out through stuff. Her sleeve here, the transparency, it's very kind of violet gray color. That looks pretty good right there. Doesn't have to be perfect right now. I just need to kind of get pieces in place so I can see where I am. Some of that embroidery is going to come in towards the end. And who knows, I may leave some of it out. It really just depends on how much of I need of that to support the idea that there's a design there. Okay, and I have no white left on my palette, so that is time to reload and find the white. No, you're in here. Aha, so I'm using titanium white. It is a fairly opaque white that has a bit of warmth to it. It has the warmth because its binder is linseed oil, and it um, that linseed oil just has a touch of yellowness. Gamblin also makes something called brilliant white, which I am um, going to switch to at some point when I run out of the white that I have. Its binder is safflower oil, and it is much cooler in comparison, or clear, and doesn't have nearly as much yellowing. And so the overall effect is that the white is much cleaner, brighter, um, and especially better for mixing cool colors. Um, Not as good mixing warm colors because that coolness does also affect the color. And but it just depends on what you're trying to get. I look at it as, since the binder is clear and the white um, that titanium makes something as close to an opaque white as you can get, the clearer the binder, the better, as to not interfere with the colors that you're mixing. Okay, um, so this flower embroidery shape, is almost close to a pure white here, but it doesn't look nearly as white as what's up there, and that's because I don't have enough darks around it supporting it. So I need to come in much darker before um, that lightness starts to read. Once I have those darks around it, then it will really start to read much more as a white. Okay. I'm sorry, I keep on kicking the tripod underneath my easel, and the easel has a spring in it, so that's sort of like the twangy sound that you keep on hearing. Really sorry about that, and just I don't know if you can hear it. There's the spring rattling in there. Anyway, not great acoustically, but neither is my mic apparently tonight. So sorry about all that. And just gonna block in the rest of this dark here. There's a little bit of purple in it and red. And then the hair shape and some of the embroidery is going to come into that. So the hair has a bit of orange. Up here it goes more warmer, or it goes more yellow, I should say. Okay, so I'm just kind of indicating here as I go. How much I want to come back and refine that depends on how much I want to keep the face really the focal point. Just trying to get as much laid in down here so that I can then refocus towards the rest of her face. Okay, that's not too bad. Like I said, I have to still go pretty dark around that light shape, and it has a lot of purple in it. So if I can just get that dioxazine purple, just a touch of it with the white, then I can start to get that purple tint, and then this red flower center that's there, just kind of indicated for now. And then I can start to darken up the colors around it. Okay, great, that's looking much better. Okay. Great. Okay, so now if I want to take this last half hour to really start refining the values in her face, um, I can really just pull this much closer so that I can compare the two more readily. See how far I can go without it all toppling over. Great. So that allows me to shift my eyes back and forth very quickly between the two. So then I can see pretty quickly where my um, shape value differences are. I'm just going to turn my light away a little bit. I'm getting a little bit too much reflection off the paint. That means the painting's going to go a little bit darker for you guys. That's that's okay. Just need to be able to see the values a little more accurately. That's a little bit too far. I think that's good. Okay. And some of this refinement I am going to do offline, because it's just a real kind of slow process of getting there. But when it's done well, then everything just ends up just reading so lifelike and solid. So it's worth that investment of time to get there. Okay, got a little bit more darker reds and oranges coming into the sides here. Sides of her nose, I mean. So I'm going to pump up the color a little bit there. And soften that up there. Okay. Then I have to look at this highlight that I put in very early on and make sure it's in the right place, the right shape. I just need to move it over just a little bit. So carve into one edge, add a little bit to the other side, drop it down a little bit here, and then add a little bit darker and redder color on top. See, there is no real big secret except to say that the better you get at judging those values and getting them in the right place, the subtlety of the color changes, then it all starts to look like something. I mean, don't really want to match it, like make it photographic in a sense, but I do want it to feel solid and real, realistic. And that just comes from just being really careful about about the values, the transitions, the colors. If something is a subtle change in the photo, then make it a subtle change in the painting. If something is darker in the photo than another area, then make it darker just by that same amount. And then before you know it, it all starts to feel very solid and real. As real as it can get anyway for a painting. That's not quite the same as photorealism, where you're kind of taking every little corner and getting it super accurate, texture, brushstroke, everything to try to match the photo. Um, Also, photorealists tend to paint much bigger so that you're minusing out any brushstroke or texture or anything that would be sort of the hand of the artist That isn't true with all photorealism. There's some photorealism that tries to bring that the artists back into it in a way. Okay, let's readjust the edge of that hair. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, let's see if I can get just her mouth so she's holding the right expression. So I just don't have it quite right yet. Okay, there's a little bit of redness there underneath the lips. And on this side, just a hint of light, just a edge. And then subtle curl. So on this part of the lips, it tends to be a sharper edge. As it gets out towards the sides, that transition tends to soften a little bit. So it is helpful to think about it in that way so that you are getting losing some of that the edge that's there. Okay, that's starting to look a bit better. I think I have the tip of her nose just off to one side just a little bit. Let's see if I can adjust that a little. And bring in some of the light that's there, wrong color, but right direction. Okay, so now we're starting to feel that tip of her nose a little bit. Can come back in with thicker white right there. I can come in really pasty right on the tip. I think that helps bring it forward. Okay, so I overplayed my hand there, coming down a little bit too low with the nostril. Okay, let's set up for this nose ring here. It is really quite fairly light reddish right up into the edge there. You don't actually have that much black or dark of the metallic. You're getting mostly just the white reflection. So I am going to go ahead and paint it that way. Cheat in, make that a little bit cleaner by getting it dark around it. And then towards the very bottom corner, it's much darker. And then there's a light that comes right into the nostril, right about there. And then again, I can use the shadow to clean that up a little bit. That looks pretty good. I think I just want a little bit of a hint of a lighter light right about there. Right there. Okay. And then I can come in with some red here that's pulling in a little bit tighter. Pink some pretty clean pinks here in this part of the cheek. So a little bit of mixture in my two reds and white just to get kind of a balanced pink. Oops, very thick there. That's okay. Just going to work that in a little bit until that's played down. Great. Okay, so that upper, so the edge of her jaw is really a bit higher right there. I can start to see it. So I want to make sure that I have her hand coming in a little bit further. Just get a touch of red in there. So, and then beef up the dark shadow. That's right there. I'm actually going to pull her neck over just a little bit. Okay. That may have been a bit too far, but it's close. Yep. That's feeling better. Let's fix this light here. Great. So about 15 more minutes here in this demo, and I'm going to call it just before 11 o'clock here, so in 16 minutes. So just pull her eyebrows down a little here. Oh, got a little bit of black in there. That was not what I wanted. Okay. Now, the overall appearance, it's still looking a little stiff. So I need to soften up edges as I go and to get kind of a little bit of, what's the word, organic feeling to the transitions. Get some of the shapes right, like the edge of this eye, where eyelashes are coming down. Let's get a little bit of the white back here. Great. Same over here. Losing my bluishness in the white of the eye there. Okay, that's looking better. Now there's a million little shapes in and around the eye, but we don't have to paint all of them. We just need to get just the overall feeling of it. And you can kind of squint and it sort of looks like it's pointing in the same direction and feeling kind of the same. That's not looking too bad. So I'm going to go on and move away from that eye if I can. And Try to do the same, similar with the other eye. Just trying to improve the shapes overall. I just need to get a little bit of lighter light in the white of the eye there, just to feel the light just grazing it. And that lower lid comes in a little bit tighter than what I have it. And then the eyelashes right down here. Soften that up a little bit. And we got this little bit of a reddish stripe here on the underside of the brow into the nose. Let's soften up this cheek a little bit, making that transition a little bit slower than when I had it. And working some of that paint together, softening up. Okay. How you guys doing out there? So, let me see. We have 6 still together here. That's good. Not a huge crowd, but it's okay. Okay, I have to remember this is a hand. I have to paint it so it looks like something. This dark area just comes in pretty tight here to the sleeve. And then the sleeve comes up pretty high over here. Okay. Sort of starting to look like a hand. It's going to take a little bit of work. You know, just some of the shapes off just a little bit, and it looks like a lobster claw. Okay, so it's about 10 minutes. Okay, I have a tendency to skew my drawing a little bit. That's always um, having something pushed sort of to one side more than the other, and I always have to work against that. And so some of the adjusting that I'm doing as I go along is trying to unskew some of that skewing. Okay. Get some of the reflection in the hair working. And try to move it over to unskew. Okay. Never put out more blue, but I think I found a little bit kind of packed in some drier paint. Okay. Well, I have my bigger brush here. I can try to paint some of these larger forms in the face as long as I've gotten a fair amount of that blue out of the ferrule of the brush. Okay. Trying to indicate some of these form changes in the forehead. So there's this light area, it's almost like a stripe that goes right across here, and then just above that is a little bit of a depression. It's the underside of that, the larger shape in the forehead, and it's a little bit reddish along the outer edge here, and then same with this side. And so try to get that overall shape right first, and then I can then start look at the smaller forms. Okay, gotta go warmer there in that cheek. Chin, I mean, in the chin. And soften up this transition a little bit right here. Okay, just started pouring really hard here, so you may hear some of that. Okay, overall it's looking pretty good. I will be doing some finer adjustment offline, and just get some of that hair coming up a little bit higher. Okay. Fix that. Okay. So that's set up pretty well for me to go in and start putting in some of the embroidery in her shirt. I can work back and forth still on some of the subtler forms in her face, um, like where this jawline actually is. It's going to take a while. It's not just the where the jawline is, but also how fast it's turning that really gives it the its correct placement in space. That just takes patience in a way, just working back and forth until it starts to look right. And um, and that's about it for tonight. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this live broadcast. And if you haven't subscribed already, I hope that you do. And that way, it helps other people see this because of the YouTube algorithm promoting it a little bit for other people to see. It also allows you to know when I'm going live the next time. You get a little bit of an email or a notice on your phone that I'm live or when I've posted a new video. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you have a great evening, and I'll see you definitely next week. And if I post any videos until then, if you subscribe, you'll get a notice of that. Thank you very much and have a good night. Oh, just one quick note. After I end the session here, very helpful if you put a comment in my comment line. I'll your comments that you put so far are just in the chat and they don't show up in the comments themselves. So I'd really appreciate the six of you who are there. If you just say just some brief words, throw in a thumbs up if you can, and that also helps. So thank you very much and have a good night. I'll be posting this to my Instagram page soon, and have a good night.